Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, October 4th. We are privileged tonight to be meeting on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish Nation, Hatsqualawin, Queestalukmuk, Latskohopmish, Okmeo. I just want to acknowledge that today we're meeting on the Day of Action for Missing and Murdered Women and Indigenous Girls and Two-Spirit people. And it's important to acknowledge that this is a day about recognizing that it's not just enough to acknowledge the issue, that these women, girls, and Two-Spirit people in our society are at greater risk to violence, but to also acknowledge that their families and their survivors are looking to government and other members of our community to take action on the report that was issued over a year ago. And so it's really important to have these days so we remember that it's not enough just to know. We have to take responsibility for responding to the information we have and the calls to action that we received and move them forward. And certainly through our work at the District of Squamish on truth and reconciliation and on equity, diversity, and inclusion, we know that this work will be folded into our efforts to continue to make sure that we're creating a safe community for all. And I'll just see if any other councillors wish to comment on this day. All right. Move to adopt tonight's agenda. Moved by Councillor Herford, second by Councillor Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. We have a proclamation request under item 3.1. The District of Squamish proclaimed November 26th, 2022 as Economic Abuse Awareness Day in the District of Squamish. Someone want to move that? Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. And also at the request of the Minister for Children and Family that the District of Squamish proclaim October 2022. I just forgot how to say the year. That the District of Squamish proclaim October 2022 as Foster Family Month in the District of Squamish. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any opposed? Motion carries. On to item 4, consideration of unscheduled public attendance. This is anyone participating in person or online who feels that they have an item that cannot wait 2 weeks until the next regular business meeting. No indication from anyone online and no one here at City Hall, so we'll move on to our consent agenda under item 7, as we don't have any public hearings tonight or scheduled timed items. So council, if there's anything in the consent agenda to which you are in conflict, it should be pulled and we'll deal with that separately. Or if you want anything to be discussed outside of the consent agenda. Not seeing any. Would someone like to move the consent agenda? Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. And so we are on to nothing under item 8. Our agendas are getting shorter, council. So that's nice to see as we wind down. So we're on to item 9, bylaws. And first up is first 3 readings of the District of Squamish 2023 permissive tax exemptions for 1 year. This is bylaw 2933 2022. And I'm just going to pull up my report so that I could tell the community who's included in that bylaw. All right, so this bylaw includes the Howe Sound Women's Center, the Sea to Sky Community Services Society, and the Shelter and Drop-In Program of with Squamish Helping Hands Society. Is that right? 2933, those are the 1 year.
I do have a presentation prepared if you'd like one, or you can go straight into the bylaws. Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Rianne Sousa, and I'm the Director of Financial Operations at the district. The goal of the presentation today is to present the Permissive Tax Exemption Bylaws, or PTEs, to Council for first 3 readings. On the agenda, we'll review the legislation for PTEs and review the bylaws. I will be keeping this brief because there was a very wholesome discussion at the Committee of the Whole. But of course, if there's any questions or at the end, we can definitely field those. The legislation is under the Community Charter of BC, paragraph 224. A council may, by bylaw, exempt land or improvements or both from property taxes, which are referred to as property tax exemptions. A PTE will exempt all property taxes, municipal and other, and redistribute the taxes to other taxpayers. A permissive tax exemption may be granted for up to a 10-year period, and council must give public notice of the proposed PTE bylaws. PTEs differ from general statutory exemptions granted under Section 220 of the Community Charter, and that the decision to grant a PTE is at council's discretion. After 3 readings of the bylaws, the next steps are on October 6th and 13th, there will be a public notice in the Squamish Chief. On October 18th, the bylaws are scheduled for adoption, and then the adopted bylaws must be sent to BC Assessment prior to October 31st. So the first bylaw is number 2933-2022. There are 3 applicants on this bylaw, and the bylaw term is for 1 year. So the first applicant is House on Women's Center Society, and this is for the women's shelter. The estimated PTE is $4.9 thousand for 2023. Sea to Sky Community Services Society is the second applicant, and this is for the Spirit Creek offices and programming space on Buckley Avenue. And the estimated PTE is $7.3 thousand. And then the third applicant on this bylaw is Squamish Helping Hands Society. And the estimated PTE is $18.9 thousand for 2023. And this is for Under One Roof and the overdose prevention site. And just because I understand that there are conflicts of interest on 3 of the bylaws, I just want to stop and see if council wants to do their motions as we go versus having people having to come and go as multiple times.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Then we won't be playing musical chairs all night.
So the recommended resolution is that the District of Squamish 2023 Permissive Tax Exemptions 1-year bylaw number 2933-2022 be given the first 3 readings.
Councillor Pettingill, removing that. Seconded by Councillor Race. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries.
The second bylaw is bylaw number 2934-2022, and the bylaw term is for 5 years. The majority of the applicants on this bylaw are regular applicants. They're regularly awarded PTEs, so I'll just stop on the new applicants. So the first applicant is the Alano Club of Squamish. The estimated PTE for 2023 is $9.6 thousand. Second is BC Lion Society for Children with Disabilities. And the estimated PTE for 2023 is 27.3 thousand. The BC Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the estimated PTE for 2023 is 8.7 thousand. The Howe Sound Women's Center Society, this has an estimated PTE for 10.9 thousand for 2023. There's then the Royal Canadian Legion Diamond Head Branch number 277. The 2023 estimated PTE is 6.9 thousand. Then I will stop on the next one as this is a new applicant. So this is Sea to Sky Community Services, and the application is for the SSCS, so that's Sea to Sky Community Services, non-market housing units at Centerpoint on 4th Avenue. And the estimated PTE for 2023 is 76,000. Next is Sea to Sky Nordics, and the estimated PTE is 2.8 thousand for 2023. And again, I'll stop on this one. This is a new applicant. And it is Squamish Senior Citizens Home Society, and this is for the new West Winds building on 3rd Avenue. And the estimated PTE for 2023 is 231,000. So the recommended resolution for this bylaw is that the District of Squamish 2023 permissive tax exemptions 5-year bylaw number 2934-2022 be given the first 3 readings.
Councillor Race, do you want to move that or you have a question? Go ahead.
Could you go back to the previous slide, please? So that BC Lion Society for Children with Disabilities, Inc. indicates an incorporated company. In the report, it talks about the Lions Society, which would be a not-for-profit. And so my recollection is that the report is correct. That slide might be incorrect.
Without looking into the details, it is for sure a society, so it is likely that the slide needs to have ink removed from it.
Yeah, it is correct, and I think in the report. Yep.
Councillor Herford.
Thank you. The Squamish Senior Citizens Home Society, could you just provide a bit of a recap around how that one came to be? Because that PTE value, I don't think necessarily represents the actual impact. So I just maybe just for those that didn't get to sit in on the committee of the whole, it'd be great to have that context.
Through the mayor, so previous to 2023, the Squamish Senior Citizens Home Society had a location that was right beside their new West Winds building, but it was on a different property. And that property received a statutory exemption under Section 220 of the Community Charter, and it was due to when the building was actually built. And so because, excuse me, a new building was built on a new piece of property, it's no longer fits within that statutory exemption. So they did submit a permissive tax exemption. So from a tax collection perspective, they're providing this PTE, there is no difference to the tax base because previously that would have been exempt under a different section of the charter.
Thank you for that clarity. And I'll move the recommendations if there's no further questions.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any further comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. So then I think we have conflicts on the next one, do we? Yes. So bylaw 2935 involves the Squamish Valley Golf Club. And I believe we have 2 councillors in conflict. Go ahead, Councillor Race.
Thank you. And I'm a member of the Squash Club, which is part of the tax-paying entity. And so this has an indirect financial impact on me, so I will recuse myself.
Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Yes, I wish to also declare a conflict here. As a member of the House Sound Curling Club, the outcome of this application may affect membership fees. Thank you.
Right, go ahead, Ms. D'Souza.
So then next we have bylaw number 29352022 for the Squamish Valley Golf Club. And just as a bit of a recap, the Squamish Valley Golf Club leases the golf club lands from the district of Squamish. A term in the lease is to provide a PTE to the golf course to reduce its property taxes to approximately 45,000. In this case, that requires a permissive tax exemption of approximately 28.7 thousand. At the committee of the whole, I was asked to bring back what the term of the lease is. So the commencement date of the lease was November 2009, and the expiry date of the lease is October 2029. And it should be noted that although this is a provision in the lease, it is a bylaw that's adopted by council each year. So council does have the ability not to adopt the bylaw. It would not be staff's recommendation to do that, though.
Any further questions? Someone want to move bylaw 2935, moved by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor French. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. And then we can bring back, I'll bring them both back so they can declare their conflict. Thank you. So we're on to the West Coast Railway Association. So Councillor Race.
Thank you. And this is my second conflict in this series. I'm also a member of that, and this has an indirect financial impact on me as a dues-paying member.
Okay, Mr. Souza, you know the problem with this is he's eating all our chocolate while he's in
I
there.
have no doubt.
Go ahead.
So this is bylaw number 29382022. The applicant is West Coast Railway Association. It's a 5-year term bylaw. The estimated PTE for 2023 is 104.5 thousand. The recommended resolution is that the District of Squamish 2023 permissive tax exemptions 5-year West Coast Railway Association bylaw number 29382022 be given the first 3 readings.
Question, Councillor Herford.
Thank you. The West Coast Railway Association has had a PT previously. Could you refresh my memory as to the term of that? Is this a renewal of a 5-year term, or is this a departure in some way from previous practice?
Through the mayor. So first question, yes, this is a PTE applicant that has received PTEs in the past. The previous term was for 3 years. It is staff's recommendation to extend this to 5 years to reduce the administrative burden on the association, as well as provide funding stability.
Seeing no other questions, Councillor Stoner moves bylaw number 2938, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any comments? Motion carries. Any opposed? I should ask that. Motion carries. We'll bring Councillor Race back in, and I think we'll say goodbye to Councillor Anderson for the next one, which is the bylaw on the PTE for the Sea to Sky Forestry Center Society.
Chair, I wish to declare a conflict on this matter. I'm a committee chair for the society and responsible for some of the functions that are outlined in the application, so I will excuse myself from this one.
This is bylaw number 29392022. The applicant Sea to Sky Forestry Center Society. The bylaw term is 5 years. The estimated PTE value for 2023 is $266. The recommended resolution is that the District of Squamish 2023 permissive tax exemptions 5 years Sea to Sky Forestry Center Society. Bylaw number 29392022 be given the first 3 readings.
Councillor Bettengill, you're moving that? seconded by Councillor Herford. Any further comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. We can bring Councillor Anderson back in. I think we're done. Thank you, Mrs. Souza. So now we are on to the District of Squamish Subdivision and Development Control Bylaw. Amendment bylaw for driveways. This is going to be a riveting conversation, I know. If two engineers can make driveways exciting, it's these two engineers. So this is for Amendment bylaw 2925-2022. And I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourselves and the bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Chris Wickham. I'm the Director of Engineering, and I'm here with Sarah Bailey. And I wanted to introduce Sarah. This is her first time presenting to Council. She's been new with the district for 6 months now as our newest municipal engineer. And as well as being a professional engineer, she's also a former Olympian.
In what sport?
Whitewater kayaking.
Welcome to the district. I think you'll fit right in.
As Chris said, I'm Sarah Bailey and working here at the district on the update to our subdivision development control bylaw. So we will be embarking upon a comprehensive update over this next year. I'm anticipating completion late 2023. In advance of the full update, we wanted to come forward with an update on the driveway section, feeling that it's important to clarify and bring up with our current requirements. So here's a list of the key changes. The location of driveways, the current bylaw discusses how they're meant to be off the street with the least amount of traffic. Proposing updating this to the road of lower classification. It makes it a bit more streamlined. We don't need to try and determine which road has least traffic. Next one's on the position of the driveways. We want them as close as practical to right angles is what it says in the current bylaw. Proposed change is driveways to be at a right angle on local roads under 8% gradient. That's to improve safety on some of our steeper roads that we want our driveways at right angles. Next is the turning. Current bylaw has no reference to turning maneuvers. Proposed change is that on-site turning maneuvers for road classified higher than local needs to be demonstrated in the design stage. This is to avoid vehicles needing to reverse onto some of our main roads to improve safety. Next one is surfacing. There's no delineation in the current bylaw for how the driveway needs to be surfaced on the portion that's between the property line and the current road. So this is proposed updated to be asphalt within this area that is district right of way. Next, for the duplexes, current bylaw has all duplexes are currently allowed 2 driveways in all circumstances. And with a triplex, they're allowed 2 driveways on corner lots. The proposed change is that the district engineer can approve 2 on local roads. Last one is the widths. Single driveways are currently allowed to be 4 to 6 meters. Proposed change is single driveway can be 4 to 6 meters. If you are approved to have multiple driveways, they can be 4 meters max. Apologies for all the text. But here's a photo of a design that I sort of marked up so you can kind of see what this looks like in practice. So this is actually how staff have been trying to influence design without the bylaw kind of being as strict as we're proposing. And this is a triplex in Brackendale where staff requested that they go down to a single driveway. So this is an example of how this can work and how we'd like it to work going forward. So you can see when you're down to 1 driveway, you actually get full length of ditch if your property has a ditch all the way around, which has certain environmental benefits. You can see it's shared for all 3 units. By being down to 1, you reduce the amount of impermeable area and paving, and you also significantly improve the safety. You have many less conflicts between vehicles and pedestrians or cyclists at that location. I think the next slide shows a photo of what this driveway looks like. This was recently completed in Brackendale. I think they are very close or just achieve their building occupancy on this unit. So this is a triplex down to a single driveway. And this is a model of what we want to see going forward, how we want to be influencing design. So the recommendation is that council gives first 3 readings on this update to the driveway section. Any questions?
Thanks, Ms. Bailey. I've got Councillor Hereford, then Councillor Pettingill.
Thank you for the presentation. I was curious around, and this is the first time I've looked deeply at this particular piece of regulations. So I had the understanding that the driveway was to be on the road that the address is based on. And I'm curious around how much of an issue that is from a public safety standpoint, as far as getting emergency services there. And we'll start with that, just that particular piece to start.
Through the mayor. The current bylaw actually says that the driveway is meant to be on the road that carries the least amount of traffic. And the proposed change is off the road of lower classification. As far as addressing goes, as some of the building permits are coming forward, we're looking at addressing, and there's one, for example, in Brackendale, will be swapping their address to move to the road of lower classification and to make sure that their frontage goes with their address. There's other implications for addressing and frontage with regards to setbacks. So you've got your front setback, your side setback. So when we're going through the process of reviewing, we're looking at all of that together, the road classification, where it's fronting, and then the zoning bylaw and all the setbacks. So I don't foresee that to be an issue. It'd be something we can rectify during design.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And similarly, if the site is just unpractical to have that access to that lower class road, what is the procedure to deal with that?
Yeah, within the wording of the bylaw, I've allowed for engineer discretion. We're practical people and don't want to have impractical driveways that make your site inaccessible. So we have allowed for some variation if need be in those circumstances.
Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, just to confirm, this wouldn't apply to driveways onto strata roads?
No.
Okay, and then if you have 2 or 3 roads along your property that are of equal classification, is it up to the property owner or to engineering to decide which road gets the driveway?
Down to engineering to decide is how it's proposed to be written.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you, through the chair. Just briefly, I'm curious why we established a minimum width for the single driveways, but not for any of the other driveways.
Sorry, through the mayor. We're just proposing no change to what's currently written. We do have minimum widths. We're just not proposing to change them at this time.
You'll move that. Thanks, Councillor Hereford. Seconded by Councillor French. Any comments on the driveway changes? Excellent. Thank you.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Bailey, and we'll look forward to I won't look forward to it, but some of these people might look forward to the full subdivision and control bylaw redo. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening. All right. So next up, we're on item 9A7. But the report to this bylaw is actually connected to the item 10A1. Are we going to do both motions here, or do we have to wait to 10A1 to do the one on the snow and ice control?
Sorry, Mayor Elliott. No, could you please move the report from 10A1 forward? And Megan or Ms. Latimer will be presenting on the suite. So the suite includes the policy and the bylaws that support the policy.
So we'll approve the bylaw and then the snow and ice control policy. And so we'll just bring item 10A1 forward as item 9A8. Ms. Latimer, over to you. Thank you. I'll just get our presentation up. Councillor Race?
Yep, we already have a paragraph 8 or section 8 over the page. So we might have to renumber everything.
Oh, you're right. There's. Ms. Arthurs, how do you want me to? Can I do, is there a 7.5 in Roman numerals? There isn't.
It can be just, it can be item 11. They all go together.
All right. So we'll move 10A1 to 9A11, but we'll read the two reports together. Pardon?
Yes, one report.
One report.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Megan Latimer. I'm the Director of Public Safety with the district, and I believe I'm joined online by the Director of Public Works, James Story, as well as our Manager of Bylaw Services, Mr. Frank Rawlings. So this evening, we're here to speak to you about the district's snow and ice control policy update process. I just want to start by acknowledging that this has been a real team effort across departments within the district, so including public works, bylaw, engineering, and legislative services, with a multi-departmental review of the issues at hand related to snow and ice control. So this evening, we have a number of recommendations to put forward. Staff are here to ask Council to review and approve an updated snow and ice control policy and approve amendments to the traffic bylaw, frontage and sidewalk maintenance bylaw, the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw, and the municipal ticket information bylaw. The changes that are being proposed this evening are as a result of recent court decisions and also a intensive staff review of the snow and ice clearing program following the heavy snowfalls that we experienced last winter. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Story if he's able to join us online to present the next few slides.
I'm here. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm James Story, Director of Public Works. So basically this, as Megan mentioned, this is based on our experiences last winter with where we had quite a extensive snowstorm that lasted for quite a while, followed by ice storms, and it stretched our resources and our budgets, as well as made us review the policy and some of the legal frameworks we operate in. Next slide, please. So basically, we looked at what went well, what we could improve, what our environmental scan was. There's been a couple of recent court decisions that we'll get to in the next slide. Continuous improvement and improving services. And some of that is looking at in some of the weather patterns in our equipment. Next slide. So these are some of the court decisions. These are fairly recent. The key thing in the first one with Nelson and Marchie is that there was a policy decision made and where the municipality was not shielded from liability. And we've looked at that and we've adapted our policy to reflect that court case. In the next one, there's a duty. It was primarily involving the duty of care owed by a property owner to keep sidewalks clear. And the court found that that duty does not exist. So we have addressed that in our policy as well. And in the snow and ice season debrief, what we found with the heavier snowstorms, with the existing resources that we have, we need to be more focused on the higher priority routes, as we simply won't be able to get to some of the secondary routes before the snow becomes compacted. Next slide, please. So what this policy does, it's an update that's probably long overdue. It's been 14 years since we've come up with it. It provides standards of performance, and it provides more clarity on the resource allocation and the standards of performance and where we will focus our activities. But at the same time, it also provides some direction to myself and my staff and allows discretion to be used when it's appropriate. In this policy and the attached maps, we've identified the first priority routes Those are primarily your hills, your safe routes to school, your emergency routes, in those areas. It also identifies priority sidewalks. Again, that's your safe routes to school, your connectivity between your industrial, commercial, and institutional areas. And it also speaks to the enforcement and education of the current frontage and sidewalk maintenance bylaw. Having said that, we will work with and try and educate property owners to try and help out and clear their sidewalks. But again, as per the court decision, they're not obligated to do so. And we simply don't have the resources to do all of them. So in conjunction with bylaws, Public Works will be working with property owners to do that. Next slide. Back over to Megan.
Back over to me. So just to briefly go through the four different bylaw amendments that we are recommending that are associated with the repeal and replacement of the snow and ice control policy. The first one is bylaw number 29302022, which is looking at amending the traffic bylaw. And this makes one change to section 6 of the bylaw, looking at stopping, standing, and parking restrictions, and allows the district to designate parts of streets as locations for scheduled snow and ice removal. This would allow the district to specify times of the year within which street parking can be prohibited to allow for snow removal. And this approach really mimics the way that other communities such as Whistler are restricting winter parking. And initially staff would intend to limit the restrictions to as narrow a time frame as possible. So December 1st to March 1st, which is significantly less than other communities that we've looked at. The second bylaw amendment is bylaw number 29312022, which is looking at amending the frontage and sidewalk maintenance bylaw. This makes one small change to section 4 of the bylaw and adds contractors hired by owners to the list of those that cannot move snow from private property to the street. Staff noted this practice on a number of ICI and residential strata properties during the last winter. And this ability to enforce is unaffected by the Dare versus Sow decision that Mr. Story spoke of earlier. The fourth amendment is bylaw number 29312022, which looks at amending the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. And this, in conjunction with the last amendment, bylaw number 29362022, the municipal ticket information bylaw. Both of these amendments are looking at creating penalties for impeding snow removal related to the restrictions that are already within those bylaws. In terms of implications, staff have crafted this new policy to reflect current operational practices. And therefore, we do not expect any additional service level changes or budget impact at this time. The priority vehicle routes will be managed with existing resources. And while attachment number 2 of the policy, the priority route map for sidewalks, would establish priorities, staff will continue to work through these priorities with existing resources. So currently staff are able to attend to the primary routes that are identified. And when most cases we'll be able to get to most of these routes with existing resources. However, the secondary routes would be attended to in very rare circumstances and would continue to rely on homeowners keeping those routes clear. Bylaw enforcement staff will continue to seek voluntary compliance with the frontage and sidewalk maintenance bylaw, and with the aim that routes can be kept clear without the need for additional district resources. So moving back to our recommendations again, are the proposed changes that we're putting forward this evening are intended to allow for improved service to the public through better snow clearing during the winter. And the proposed changes are attempting to manage and prioritize district resources in a more effective and efficient manner. So we've listed the recommendations here again for council to consider, and we'll stop here for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Latimer. Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. So I was noticing on the maps that have the red priority routes, some streets are highlighted in green. Is just for those that maybe were looking like me at that level of detail, does that mean anything significant?
Yes, I'll maybe let Mr. Story speak to that.
Thank you. Through the chair, my thanks to Councillor French for bringing that up. I think the maps with the new lens do need maybe an update for clarity on that. We use those maps for operational purposes, and those routes that are highlighted are the routes that require a smaller F550 type truck to plow, as opposed to the larger single and tandem axle trucks, which won't fit on those roads. So they are all priority routes. It just designates what vehicles and resources we need to allocate to those.
Okay, guess that makes sense. And I have another question. I noted that in Schedule Y of the traffic bylaw and the designated bylaw contraventions and penalties, table 6.1 W, 2Is, is failure to display insurance decal carrying a fine of $100. And I recognize this is way off course to do with snow and ice, but license plate validation decals are no longer needed on BC vehicles. So is that something that will come back to us, or could we deal with that tonight?
Through the mayor, yes, thank you for noting that. This is something that staff are looking at. There are some conversations happening with the province with a number of different municipalities that have raised this because there are some challenges when it comes to enforcement. It just changes the strategy. So this is something that we'd be looking to bring back to council.
Councillor Pettengill and then Councillor Herford.
Yeah, thank you. A few things, and I wasn't entirely clear, but from the report, I understand, or the precedent set in some of the court cases mean we can't necessarily compel some homeowners from clearing their property. We've changed our bylaws so that we're not liable if there's an accident. So what that means is if people don't clear their own sidewalks, we may go for a longer period with snow and ice, and we're protected liability wise, but getting through may be more difficult. And so we're still going to rely on people to take care of their own sidewalks. And if that doesn't happen, then we may be looking at tax increases or something. So we have more resources to do it ourselves. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question through the mayor. I'll refer that over to Mr. Story.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, yes, that's correct. Our bylaws and department will be working with those homeowners to try and convince them to do it on their own accord, as will our staff if we have them available. But you're absolutely correct. And if we do run into those issues, that's something we will bring back to council in the future.
Okay, thank you. And then just on the note of priority streets and so on, some people do have trucks with plows on them and stuff. Does our framework permit them, if they want to take the initiative and plow their own street, are they allowed to plow public roads?
To the chair, the answer is yes and no. If they are a contractor to the district, then yes, but that implies that we have had communication, we have a legal agreement with them, that they're aware of our practices and policies. We discourage anybody in the public from simply just who has a plow in the front of their truck from doing so, because oftentimes what they do is they just simply, for lack of better words, it's like a Zamboni on the ice rink. It just clears the top and you wind up with a very smooth, slippery surface that's more dangerous if they don't plow it properly and apply salt or sand, depending on the temperature.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question was just for the painted bike lanes on streets, just wanting to understand where those fall into the priority and expectations around the public or our own operators piling snow in bike lanes. Just what should our expectations be?
Through the chair, where it's possible, we'll try and clear it. But oftentimes, if we do get a severe snowstorm as we had, there becomes a very limited amount of room on the roadway to push the snow to, and it will wind up in some of those bike lanes. We will endeavor to get to those with our smaller equipment to remove it, but in the short term, it may very well wind up there.
Councillor Herford.
Thank you. Of particular interest to me was the bylaw to amend the traffic bylaw. It talks about designating spaces for no parking, for snow removal, and so on. But I didn't see that commented on in the budget section. There was around implementation of this. Is this going to be done without signage, or should there be a signage element to implementing this policy?
Through the mayor, excuse me, through the mayor, my understanding is this will be done through existing resources, through our existing budgets that's put forward already for, to cover signage throughout the district, but I'll let Mr. Story add anything.
Thank you, Megan. Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
And then, thank you. And then, with that in mind, how will those decisions be made? As this, I could see this sort of affecting how each street or neighborhood operates as a whole. So, and we're coming up to the time of year where this would start to come into effect. So, is this something that we expect to have in place throughout this winter? And how are those specific decisions around the timing or the no parking areas or whatever is needed for implementation?
Thank you through the chair. It is something we would hope to have in place for this winter. If in the absence of snow, if we do get parking infractions, we would hope to do an educational campaign in partnership with bylaws and leave notices on those vehicles and try and educate the people. That's how we would envision rolling it out in the significant winter storms. If those vehicles impede access for the plows, we will be unable to plow those roads, and we will have to make an operational decision at that time as to how we deal with those vehicles.
Councillor Stoner?
Thank you. Just to follow up a bit on the winter parking restrictions, I'm curious if we have a sense of where these would apply. Are they kind of blanket across the entire district? Are there certain regions that we know are kind of higher issues or priorities? And is there a way to kind of start to communicate that out earlier rather than later for community members?
Yes, through the mayor, there's been a number of areas that staff have been looking at from the during the review process that are sort of high priorities in terms of really challenging situations that were faced last year and in other seasons. And so it would be looking at really targeting where these areas are and not blanket across the community. James, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I can add just a little bit. It's primarily the for example, 5th, 6th on the west side downtown, where the roads are very narrow and there's a lot of times parking on both sides. It's very difficult for a plow truck to get down there. It would be roads like that as opposed to any other roads that are larger.
That's helpful context. Thank you. And then I just had one other question about the priority route map for the sidewalks. And I appreciate I think we mostly focused on safe routes to school, but I'm looking at map 7, which is Brackendale, page 84 of our package. And there seems to be a lack of connectivity between some of the areas identified. So I think our safe routes to school goes up Eagle Run and then Cottonwood, but Cottonwood's not identified. So I'm just curious if kids are expected to go up Government, or how are we looking at connectivity on some of these maps?
Through the chair, my apologies, I don't have that map in front of me, and I don't have an answer, but I will certainly take that away and look at that with the view of making sure we do have that connectivity.
Thank you.
Just curious about what the communications strategy is to homeowners. So especially if someone relies on street parking, and given our challenge of clearing sidewalks on some of these roads, I guess these would be primary roads that we're asking people not to park on. Is that correct? It's not the secondary roads, it's the primary ones. But if people are parking on the street and then we have a big snowfall and the sidewalks aren't cleared, oftentimes you're sort of navigating large snowbanks and a plowed road, but there's no sidewalks. So I imagine we'll get some complaints or confusion around where should I park or where's the alternative parking. And also I'm curious about the hours of day those parking restrictions will be in place.
Through the chair, it was anticipated that those parking restrictions would be in place 24 hours a day. because we don't know when the snowfall is going to occur. And we do anticipate getting those concerns, and that is something we're going to have to work through and with the residents as to where there is limited parking. We do recognize that it is going to be somewhat difficult perhaps for some people. But the alternative is we won't be able to get the plows down the road. So this was the solution we put forth.
And through the mayor, if I may add, there was a lot of discussion and we did look at a lot of other communities for models that worked well and where we could, minimize the impact on parking. And so this is why the recommendation is to restrict only one side of the street and not both sides, as you see in other communities, where often it'll be both sides of the street are restricted. One will be 24 hours, the other will be between the hours of 9 and 5. So this still preserves parking on one side of the street. And we also shortened that time frame in terms of when this would be implemented. So many communities start early November and go to the end of March. And we're proposing at least to start for this winter and to test a December 1st to March 1st timeframe.
So when can we expect communication to start to go out to households that are impacted?
Through the mayor, I believe we'd be looking to do that in advance of that December 1st date so that people are given some notice and can start to think of some alternatives of where they might park. So once we receive direction from council on this, then we would be looking to prepare those, work with the communications team in November to issue those out.
Mr. Story, I had another issue that arose last year during the heavy snow and then the freezing rain, is that a lot of us that live on secondary streets were looking for the stormwater drains to uncover them and help, because then we experience flooding on some of the secondary roads. And I know other citizens brought up the fire hydrants. So I'm wondering if there's a strategy we're looking at for community members so they know where they can uncover the drain to help with once the snow starts to melt, and also where fire hydrants are located.
Thank you. Through the mayor, we will certainly be looking at that. Fire hydrants can be marked, and in other communities I've worked in, that is what we have done. We have marked them with posts. As far as the drains go, residents are able to call in. We could provide that information to them over the phone. And we do have the ability to produce some maps that I believe the public can access through the internet, that we may be able to add a drainage layer showing the locations of those, and we'll certainly try and do that.
Thank you. Councillor Pettengill?
Yeah, I understand not only having parking on one side of the street so plows can get through. In other communities I lived in previously, though, that alternated. So it was from the 1st to the 15th is one side, and then the 15th to the end of the month the other side. So at a max, a little over 2 weeks, you can fully clear both sides of the street. It sounds like that's not the way we're going with this year. It's just one side for the whole season.
Yeah, through the chair, we did talk about that amongst the team, and the feeling was that changing and alternating may become confusing, and we may be in the instance where somebody forgets or what have you, and they would be parked on the wrong side of the road. Then we'd have either a bylaw issue or a operational issue. And so we felt that the easiest thing for people to remember would be one side of the road. We can certainly revisit that if council wishes.
Any other questions on this? All right. So there is a suite of bylaws and policies. So the first one is the District of Squamish Traffic Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 2930 2022. Moved by Councillor Hertford, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any comments? Go ahead, Councillor Stoner, and then Pettengill.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for staff for all the work on this. I think following up on some of the comments, it will be really important to make sure our communications are really clear and out as early as possible. I think having this in place for the coming winter months makes good sense. But giving our community as much time as possible to figure out alternatives, to understand what it is that we're proposing and where it will be applied. I foresee a Squamish Chief newspaper article coming out on Thursday that says one side of the road will be closed for all of Squamish, and that's not the case. So making sure that our communications are clear and concise and out early will go a long way to get this program off to a right start. But thanks for the work here.
Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at this as maybe some experimenting, and last year was unusual. I guess we'll see what the climate change is going to bring in the future, and hopefully it was unique last year. But when I lived in Winnipeg, there wasn't restrictions, but a tow truck might come and just move your car arbitrarily, and then you had to find it after a snowfall, and that's how they dealt with it. So you didn't lose spots, but you lost your car for a little while. So those are maybe things we'll find out we have to try, I guess, but I'm okay to give the staff suggestion a go. And I think I agree, though, the communications will be really, really important. But thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Race.
Thank you. I happen to live on a street which I think is one of the few streets in Squamish where there are already winter parking restrictions, actually from November to I think around the end of March. And that is a result of a snow event that happened about 10 years ago where the banks moved in and the plow couldn't get down the street. But it was enacted by signage. On every lamp pole, there is a sign that says between these dates, no parking this side. And so communication is, of course, important. And I just, if there's anything other than signage, the question is, who does it reach? And if you put leaflets to residents and ads in the newspaper, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to catch visitors to the community and people like that who aren't familiar with kind of the local neighborhood. So I think this will be a bit of a learning process for us, and we'll just have to kind of follow up on that. And I guess consider the dates. As I say, on my street, it's a little bit longer, almost a month at each end compared to what the report talks about. So we'll see what works, and maybe my street will be opened up a little bit. Who knows?
All right, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. District of Squamish Frontage and Sidewalk Maintenance Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 2931 2022. By Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor French. Any comments on this one? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. I just want to note that Mr. Rollins got off easy tonight. No questions for him. So, and then District of Squamish Notice Enforcement Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 2932 2022 be given first three readings. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. And District of Squamish Municipal Ticket Information Bylaw Amendment Bylaw for Traffic Bylaw Fines number 2936 2022 be given first three readings. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then we moved 10A1 to number 11 here, that council repeal snow removal policy D061-01 dated January 2008. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any opposed? Motion carries. And that council approves snow and ice control policy 2022. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Story. Thank you, Ms. Latimer. It's nice to have that in place before the snow flies. And Mr. Rawlings, sorry we didn't have any questions for you, but thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
All right. Okay, next up, we're on 9B1. So these are adoption of bylaws. Ms. McJanet's here. I don't think you have a presentation, do you? No. All right. So Zoning bylaw, amendment bylaw for marine zones, number 2771, 2020 be adopted. You want to move that, Council Race? Seconded by Council Herford. Any comments? Councillor Anderson.
I just wanted to make a brief observation regarding the section of the report to council under organizational plan alignment, building bridges. The paragraph here refers to our ongoing marine planning. This is being just one element of it, these marine zones. But I just found that the emphasis in the description of the Squamish Nation as stakeholder here, if you like, might also be mindful of the fact that the Squamish Nation waterfront lands comprise half of our port. And that in the past, when initiatives have been brought forward with respect to the oceanfront, the Squamish Nation representatives have come forward with some vigor to point this out, their economic development stake in the waterfront lands that they own in fee simple, namely Site B. So it's just an observation that to complete the picture, the Squamish Station has very much an economic development stake in our ongoing marine planning. But that's just a light observation, and I'm very glad to see where we've arrived in this process so far in our marine action strategy implementation.
Councillor Race.
Thank you. And delighted to see the end of this part of the continuum. I'm going to say it's not the end of marine planning by a long shot, but this has been going on for several years, and one pandemic and a lot of public engagement to get us to this point. And I'm happy to see this part of it close off. But we are an oceanfront community. We have marine issues constantly, and we are evolving with them through industry, recreation, conservation. And so I expect marine issues and planning will continue to be parts of our agenda going forward. And look forward to watching that happen from the sidelines.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge Ms. McJanet for her work on this file. You consistently take on some challenging files for us, Ms. McJanet, and this one was no different, and appreciate the added engagement that was required after the first public hearing, and then getting us to a really successful second public hearing, and the engagement that happened with the forestry sector, just to answer council's questions and make sure that we felt like we were going in the right direction. So it is great to finally have this in place. As Councillor Ray said, we expect that it will serve the community well in some of the conversations we have to have going forward. And it's nice to know that it's here, and I too can watch from the sidelines as it evolves. So thank you very much for your work on this. Council, any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. McJanet. All right, so as we sweep up and clean up our work from the last 4 years, we have zoning bylaw, amendment bylaw for CD 99 Hunter Place, number 2634, 2018. So we are at adoption, but we also have a land development agreement in front of us. And so any questions? Let's see, Ms. Belt, but or yes. All right, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. Section 2.3 of the agreement is titled Development of Lands in Accordance with Rezoning Package. And I'll quote from it. The developer covenants and agrees that its further applications for approvals to subdivide and develop the lands will be in compliance with the plans included in the rezoning package, subject to district bylaws, and will not alter the location of the uses, buildings, or densities by more or less than 5%, unless otherwise expressly permitted within this agreement or amendment bylaw. The developer will seek the necessary approvals with the district for any required amendments. This really jumped out at me because 5% for a project of this size is quite significant. And I don't recall seeing this clause in other land development agreements. Maybe they snuck by me in these last 4 years, but I don't recall anything like this before. So I'm wondering, is this standard language for these agreements?
Through you, Mayor. That's a great observation, and thank you for reading the land development agreement. It's not standard language, the 5%. We generally have some flexibility in these agreements for minor changes in the site plan, essentially. So the agreement does not supersede the zoning provisions. Zoning sets the uses, it sets the maximums and the minimums when it comes to siting. And then the zoning bylaw also attaches the site plan itself as a schedule and says that you have to generally follow that plan. So the land development agreement essentially speaks to that provision of the zoning bylaw. And every land development agreement is a little bit different, and sometimes proponents want some security around, okay, how much can we move things around the box of maximums and minimums? So that's what it refers to.
Okay. So having heard that, then does this need to be in the land development agreement? Could we remove it at this point?
It doesn't, well, we'd have to go back and talk to the applicant. And at this point, we'd have to pull it from the agenda so it can be revised.
Okay. I don't wish to hold it up. So based on what I heard, I don't think I'm as concerned about this when I first read it. Thank you.
Counselor Stoner.
Thank you. This item also jumped out at me. And so I just want to clarify, I think what I heard, Mr. Valaniskis, is that this provides some flexibility in how the density might be moved around on the site plan, but it doesn't actually change the overall density allowable on the zone, correct?
Through you, Mayor. That's correct. So essentially you can't exceed the zoning bylaw with a land development agreement.
Okay, that's helpful context for me. And then I just had one other question. We didn't actually secure, there's the specific phases. So they were identified through this whole process as phase 1, 2, or 3, but the land development agreement doesn't necessarily say that phase 1 will happen first. So I just want to make sure that, especially with respect to the community amenity contributions in 7.1, that the fact that we haven't secured the phasing specifically doesn't change how we're receiving the community amenity contributions.
Through you, Mayor, that's correct. So there's flexibility on phasing, but no flexibility on the community amenity contributions and when they come in.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, so we have two motions in front of us that we authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute the land development agreement as attached to the report on October 4th, and that the zoning bylaw be adopted. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any further comments on this? Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I think this building sets a good standard. We asked for a fair bit in the community amenity contributions in terms of childcare, in terms of affordable units or rental units, in terms of the energy sources of the building, and glad to see this development meet these. From my perspective, there's some compromise on the amount of car dependence we are requiring. I would prefer we sort of mandate less of it, but as a whole, I can support this. And I think for those that I know, the question of an additional access out of downtown is something that's talked a lot about. And so this is adjacent maybe, but this is a piece of that. And so I guess glad to see this moving forward. And I think it ticks a lot of boxes for what I'm hearing the community wants.
Any other comments? Councillor Anderson.
In the discussion that we've had over recent months on this proposal, we have focused on details of a road, the fate of the roadway and other details. However, overall, I think that it reflects a project a development project that has a lot of proactive planning, has looked ahead at community appetites, at council desires, and where we're headed, if you like, and that the project, we might emphasize this in characterizing the project. Lots of proactive planning reflected in what we have before us.
Anyone else? I think this is going to be a great addition to this part of the downtown. I think it is unique in its architecture and provides a lot of amenities and public space improvements in the area. And I look forward to seeing it move forward. And I'm glad we got to clear it off our to-do list before we finish this council term. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And finally, the District of Squamish amendment bylaw for 1001 Finch Drive. Again, there's a land development agreement associated with this file, and also that the zoning bylaw, amendment bylaw 2874/2021 be adopted. Questions? Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, on this one, a big portion of what we had discussed with the rezoning was the childcare space, and that's not included in the land development agreement. So I just want to make sure where that is being secured.
That is being secured via the lease, so that was never in the agreement.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Does someone want to move the land development agreement and adoption? Councillor French is moving that, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any further comments on this one? Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, I didn't support this at third reading, and I'm still not ready to support it. I recognize that they weren't looking for density in relation to meeting some of the climate commitments, but I think this is a rather large building, and we heard some feedback about that. And so I was looking for a little bit more movement under some of the climate commitments there. I am not quite comfortable with the level of long-term childcare commitment, and I'm still quite concerned about the proximity to the pipeline. That's not directly the developer's fault, but I think it is our responsibility to manage that with our zoning. And I don't think we have the correct sufficient information from Fortis. For me, I'm just not comfortable with this rezoning at this point.
Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. I will be supporting the motion on the floor. I do think that this development does provide a lot of the things that we continue to hear from our community that we need. So 44 purpose-built market rental units. Some of those will be first right refusal for those working in the childcare sector. The amount of much needed childcare space, open space, as well as a no gas covenant for the majority of the building. So I think that this hits a lot of the targets that we've been trying to achieve, and I'm happy to support it.
Seeing no further hands, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Councillor Pettengill opposes. Motion carries. All right, so we're on to 10B1 Community Resiliency Investment Program Grant 2023. Is there a presentation on this?
Sure.
There he is. Hi, Chief Stoner.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Yes. We'll see how this goes. Okay. Do you have my presentation?
We do. We can hear you and we can see the presentation. Go ahead.
That's a very good start. Okay, I am here today to discuss the Community Resilient Investment Program for 2023. In particular, I am looking at the District of Squamish support submitting an application to the Union of BC Municipalities to the Community Resilient Investment Program for $200,000. So we've been applying to and receiving this grant since 2019. In that time, we've received we've been approved for over $500,000 of funding. We have used this funding for a number of fire smart initiatives. Every summer almost, we run a media campaign. We do a community chipper program, which helps people who want to fire smart their communities to remove debris from their properties. We funded the wildfire hazard DPA work. We've done fuel prescriptions for a number of areas within a district, most recently Merrill Park. Fuel treatments, we are currently working on fuel treatments in the area of the airport polygon. We probably have a couple of grant cycles to complete that. We are in the midst, halfway through, completing a demonstration fuel management treatment for the Brackendale Farmers Institute. So this will be, when it's complete, showing what a well-performed fuel treatment looks like. And it'll be a showpiece, and there'll be some signage up that'll show before and after. We've done fire smart assessments of the district's critical infrastructure. And this year we've spent a lot of time doing neighborhood fire smart assessments for homeowners to help them know what they have to do to make their houses fire smart. So that's what we've done since 2019. In 2023, we are just looking to continue with our programs. We want to continue with the fuel treatments and in proximity to the airport. We continue with fire smart homeowner assessments and community chipper programs, an extensive wildfire prevention media campaign again this year, and training for our local fire smart representatives. With budget implications, normally the grant intake is $150,000, what we're permitted to apply for. This year, good news, we're permitted to apply for $200,000. So we would like to apply for the full $200,000 to incorporate the additional $50,000 into the 2023 to 2027 financial plan. We would come back before 3 readings and adoption of the financial plan bylaw in December to have that approved or added to the budget, that $50,000. Obviously, no CRI related work will take place beyond what council has approved for our budget. That is very short, but that is what I am here to ask for today.
Thank you, Chief Stoner. We like short presentations.
Wonderful.
Councilor Herford.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. My question was around in the report. It mentions that one of the actions not completed was a fuel treatment in the Swift Creek area due to the cost per hectare. But I'm assuming because it was on this list in the first place that it has some importance. I'm just curious how else these either this area or areas such as this can be addressed and improved.
That's a great question. Thank you. They have recently, with the addition of this $200,000, they have recently updated the grant program. And to be honest, I'm still working my way through it. It may be that they've raised the minimum level or the maximum level, I guess, of grant dollars per hectare available to us. And I'm hoping that'll allow us to move into that area. So I'm hoping that they have made some adjustments that allow that work to take place.
Thank you for that. My concern was that it had risen to the top of a list to be attempted to be completed, and then I just wanted to make sure that we hadn't lost that bit of work. But thank you for that clarity.
Yeah, through the chair, we do a plan to complete that work in the future. There are a number of important areas where we're working right now around the airport is also an area of importance.
All right. If for some reason we don't have the dollars per hectare we need, we're very good at advocating for more money for spaces. We did that with childcare. And so you can bring that back if Chief Stoner, if it's not quite right, and get the next mayor to go to the province and make that happen. Okay. Does someone want to move that? Moved by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor Herford. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring to attention to Fire Chief Stoner, in case you may not be aware, that the project up at the airport has been on forestry tour agendas 3 times, where groups from Vancouver have come to look at this, in effect, a demonstration project. I'm very excited to hear about the demonstration project you referred to, the Brackendale Farmers Institute initiative, that park, the BFI Park initiative, and that will be very valuable communication exercise with the public. I just wanted to just also mention that a focus of discussion during these tour group visits at the airport site is on the need for all of us province-wide to work to undertake treatments on a greater area because of the backlog for less money per unit area. And perhaps in the future on sites like what we're looking at here around the airport, mechanization may be the future. This is just a general topic, but I just wanted to let you know, Fire Chief Stoner, that the projects here at Squamish are being observed and are on tour study tour agendas from UBC, BCIT, and other groups visiting. Thank you.
I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. We don't have anything
Very
under
much.
item 11. Thank you. Nothing under late item agendas. Action requested, item 12 under correspondence, that the correspondence from A. Duncan be referred to Planning and Engineering Services for a response. Moved by Council French, seconded by Council Pettengill. Council Pettengill.
Yeah, I would just like to thank Ms. Duncan for this letter. I'd like to acknowledge that that is a particularly, I would say, the most intimidating part of the corridor trail.
Do you want to speak to which part for people who might be listening
so-
and haven't read the letter?
Right. So this is about the section of the corridor trail that goes under the bridge just past the Adventure Inn. And because of the highway work, from what I understand, the lights aren't working and we don't have a great way to get them back on. But you know, I want to acknowledge the concern Ms. Duncan has about that section of trail. Even if you're not dealing with the reality of being a woman in today's world, there's two blind right angle corners. There's just a little short bit of rock, and then you're into the water. And so if there's any solution we could find in the shorter term, that would be fantastic. I don't want to direct micromanage staff work, but you know, I wonder if there's an opportunity in partnership with the Adventure Inn to run a little power line in the short term under the trail. Just throw that out there. Maybe that's not realistic, but yeah, that is a very challenging piece of the trail, and so just wanted to acknowledge that.
I'll call. Go ahead, Councillor Ferd.
Thank you. And I went through this section of trail last night in the dark, and it's terrifying. And it also highlighted how wonderful it is to have our active transportation routes lit. And I think this is important work across the board. And I'm thankful that this issue was raised for that particular section.
Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. I've just been alerted that there is someone who would like to speak to the proclamation of the Economic Abuse Awareness Day. So I will turn that over to, what's the name, Miss Murray? Michaela Meyer. Hi, Michaela. Sorry to keep you waiting.
No
I
worries.
was not alerted till now that you were online and wish to speak to this. So please go ahead. It's an important topic.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for giving us the time to just give a brief presentation. So thanks as well for also having the proclamation right now on the meeting today. We just wanted to give have the opportunity just maybe provide a bit more context. So my name is Michaela Meyer. I'm the policy analyst at the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment. We are, I think, the only Canadian organization, nonprofit organization, that is working solely on the topic of economic and financial abuse in the context of domestic violence. So basically, through our work, we've already realized that in general, there's just a lack of awareness of this specific form of domestic or gender-based violence. Many people think more about the physical or maybe sexual violence, maybe even more now about the emotional or psychological abuse, but not that many in society at large, I would say, know much about or aware of the economic or financial abuse. So basically the controlling of financial resources that really like keeps any information from the victim survivor about like family income, doesn't, you know, like maybe harasses her at work, so that she usually, I will gender now to make it easier, because it's a lot of times the women that will keep her from having any income sources, and maybe don't even have access to the joint account, not any awareness about the family financial situation. And what we've seen through our research that we've conducted, that it's the prevalence is very high. So almost 95% of all victim survivors of domestic violence are also experiencing economic abuse. And this can have very long-lasting consequences even after separation. So that means, for example, having maybe a lot of debt build up that she wasn't even aware of through joint accounts, you know, like making it then difficult to find a place to rent with a bad credit score, having no really understanding of like budgeting or you know, basically financial literacy. So it can have very long-lasting consequences even after separation. So basically, our organization really wants to raise awareness about the topic of economic abuse. And one of the ways that we're doing it is by asking cities across Canada to proclaim November 26th as Economic Abuse Awareness Day. So basically, it falls right into the month November, the month of domestic abuse awareness month, as well as financial literacy month. So, excuse me. So we want to proclaim November 26th as Economic Abuse Awareness Day, where we make also ourselves a lot of efforts to have like panels and to really highlight that issue, to basically raise more awareness on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks so much for being here and for staying on the lines that you could speak to this important issue. We did already pass the proclamation. I'm thankful for our council's support on it, but I appreciate the additional detail. And I think the fact that you shared of 95% of survivors of domestic violence have experienced economic abuse just speaks to how persistent it is. And as you say, it's not something that we often speak about. The other often more visible elements of abuse are the things that catch our eyes and they catch our conversation. But this is really about it has such long-lasting impacts, as you mentioned, on folks who are experiencing it. So thank you for being here and for raising that awareness and for bringing it to our attention. And unfortunately, we have to make this proclamation, but hopefully the awareness brings some sort of change.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Meyer, for being here and bringing this to our community. It's I'm sorry you had to wait, but I'm grateful for the additional context, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right, Council, we're on to item number 13, which we have nothing and nothing under 14. Any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none. Nothing under 16. There was no, anybody with a notice of motion? You've really run out of time. So thankfully, we don't have that tonight. Under 18, people will see that we've just brought forward our new advisory design panel appointments. We don't have any unscheduled public attendance under 19. Any questions for open question period? It's only questions. Nothing. Okay. No one online, Harley, to ask questions? No. Great. Councilor staff announcements. Councilor Stoner.
Yeah, I just thought I would give an update on the Squamish Regional District meeting that Mayor Elliott and I were at as directors last week. A few exciting pieces of policy. We adopted a new purchasing policy, which starts to speak to some of our environmental and social procurement initiatives that kind of reflect some of the work that we've done here at the district. So it's nice to see that reflected at the regional district level. We also adopted a maternity and parental leave policy at the regional district level. So that is also fantastic, making that table a little bit more accessible to folks as well. And I think the big one that was on the agenda was third reading of Furry Creek. For folks who don't know, this is a master plan community that already had development rights for over 900 dwelling units and 300 resort hotel units. So it's been about a 3.5-year process of going through kind of finessing this proposal. And I think we have come a long way in terms of what we were able to achieve through the negotiations. So there will be 750 market dwelling units, 120 non-market affordable dwelling units, and 120 resort hotel units just down the street in Furry Creek. They will be building a new fire hall. They will be putting in all new apparatus and equipment in that fire hall. As I mentioned, the affordable housing, there are no gas covenants on the entire build. There's community center, childcare space, parks and open trail space, active transportation, and a list of other things. But what we really were focusing on was trying to ensure where existing development rights were for pretty much a large single family development, that this is actually going to be a complete community, or at least there'll be some services there for the folks who move in, and there'll be a diversity of housing forms, including single family and condos and townhouses and small lot single family homes. So I think it came a long way from what we first saw 3 and a bit years ago. Councillor or Director Race was at the table back then. And so I just want to let folks know that has passed third reading now.
Thank you for the update. Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, thank you. A couple things to mention. Friday was the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and two big events. It was a sea of orange at Junction Park at OCM Pavilion, and it was just fantastic to see the community come together and hearing some of the stories. They're always hard to hear, but it felt really good that our community was there to listen and really come together as a community. It was a really special day. So thank you for everyone that was there and that was wearing their orange shirt. And then later, Hualacton and Glen Campbell had an event where they and actually Councillor Anderson was a key part of that, where we saw some just fantastic new art pieces by Hualacton at Brennan Park. So everyone's got to take a look at that, and yeah, just recognizing the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. So yeah, Friday was a heavy day, but a wonderful day. And then on Sunday, Niall Hart was a Quest student who did a documentary in 2019, Where Do We Stand, about wood fiber LNG, and former Mayor Heinzman, Mayor Elliott, Councillor Anderson, and myself were all interviewed for that documentary. And I'd seen it, I guess because I was in it online, but I forgot it hadn't had a showing because of COVID and everything. So it was the first time to actually see it out in public. And that was at the Brackendale Art Gallery. So that was really cool, a bit of a panel discussion afterwards. And it's a tough topic, but it's a really well done documentary. Is happy to be part of it. And yeah, it was a great Sunday to finally see that with a group of people. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Stoner.
Thank you to Councillor Pettengill for speaking to the National Truth and Reconciliation events that happened on Friday. I do also want to recognize that Mayor Elliott was blanketed at that event by Squamish Nation, and I want to thank her for all of the work that she has done to build relations with Squamish Nation, not just at this table or politically, but as it transcends through our organization and our community. And I know that we don't do this work to get recognized. We do this work because it's good and it's important work and it's the right work to do. But I was touched to see the level of gratitude that the Squamish Nation had for the amount of work that Mayor Elliott has put into being a good ally. And I want to speak to that. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a very special moment for me, for sure. And just very proud of this organization recognizing its responsibility in doing this work. And we should also thank My Sea to Sky, Justice for Girls, and Squamish Nation, who are holding a vigil tonight in OCM Pavilion and at the park to recognize survivors and also family members of missing and murdered women and Indigenous girls. So it's heavy work for the nation to do this work, to acknowledge the National Day on Truth and Reconciliation, to acknowledge the need for action on missing and murdered women, Indigenous girls, and Two-Spirit people. So we have to keep lifting up our fellow citizens in Squamish Nation and recognize their good work to educate and make sure that we don't forget that we have so much more work left to do. I had the pleasure on Sunday night of doing a virtual kickoff with the new Squamish Youth Council, preparing them for their first in-person meeting this Wednesday. It is a great group, 17 young people from grade 9 on up to post or university age. They're very keen. I will be very sad to hand over responsibility to a member of the next council. It doesn't have to be the mayor. I think it's whoever is most interested in doing the work with the council, but they're raring to go, and I can't wait to see what they accomplish as a group over the coming school year. So, and thank you to Tori Hansen and Jeremy Valeriot, who've been instrumental in making sure that that gets off to a good start. All right. Don't see any more hands, so we don't need to have a closed meeting. Motion to terminate. Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor, what's your name? Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to the staff who supported us tonight. See you next time.